theory in the book, I still want to ask, like, we have now had so much time pass between 1859 and the publication of The Origin of Species and today, and we've had so many new things that, to look at, right? But one of the biggest ones we've mentioned is time. The idea that at some point in the 20th century, there came the thesis of the Big Bang. Boyle, or is it Hoyle, names the Big Bang, and then slowly you get more and more proof for the Big Bang, and then you get the consensus of scientists saying, yes, we believe the universe is finite. There's a finite number of years that we have to work with for what we call evolution, right? So when we put forward the idea, as you have and other proponents of intelligent design, that we don't have enough time and we don't even have close to enough time, has anybody responded? Have any scientists responded in anything that is not merely ad hominem?
Well, yes. Actually, some people have published papers in official science journals addressing such questions. And these days, if you address a question that is relevant to intelligent design and evolution, it kind of bumps your paper up a couple of notches if you are going to try to take down evolution.
Kind of like more retweets. Just I want to break it down for the young people.
That's right.
Yeah. And they're like, we stopped Twitter 10 years ago. But so it's still like a hot topic.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so okay, all right.
And to answer the previous question, there was a paper in a leading journal, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, titled, "Is There Enough Time for Evolution?" Specifically saying these intelligent design folks say that there's not enough time, and going through a calculation to show that there was. But of course, calculations and models, depend on your assumptions. And the fellow writing this assumed that, well, once you got an improvement, you could get another one. Essentially, just assumed Darwin's theory was true and said, voila, there's no problem. He didn't discuss any of the stumbling blocks that ID folks have pointed out. It was a cartoon model.
I remember literally like 30 years ago reading a cover article in the Atlantic Monthly that dealt with the issue of how did life come into being in the first place. So forget about life evolving, right? But just how do you get like the first cell, the first anything? And the article, we talk about courage and willingness to face the facts. The article in the Atlantic effectively said, in all the time that we've been looking at this, we are no closer to an answer. We have no idea, which is very different from, the Miller experiment where they kind of, it happened like this, right? And then we'll give you the details. And then the decades pass, no details. So like that's one level of that's not explained. But yes, you're now talking about a completely new level. So I want to get to that idea. So at some point somebody says, okay, evolution goes by, we don't call it variations, now it's mutations, and now we can look at mutations. So what is it in the last 20 years that makes it clear that that can't work?
Well, it's our ability to track down helpful changes, helpful mutations in the DNA. As I said earlier, we couldn't do that before. People would see some bacteria grow better in a certain environment, or a bunny rabbit have a different coat color and blend into the snow better.
You can just say rabbit. It's just it's a scientific audience. They can take it.
But they couldn't track down what was going on. Now we can.
Why?
Because of technology. Everybody, I think, has heard of the Human Genome Sequencing Project, where the DNA complement of humans has been deciphered letter by letter by letter by letter, 3 billion or so. But that was really tough sledding. It took a decade or so, billions and billions of dollars. But it's kind of like computers back in the 50s. They took up rooms and they were clunky and expensive. Now you've got computers in your hands which can access the world. Same thing with DNA sequencing technology. It has become faster and cheaper and easier. And now people can sequence genomes of brand new organisms, in an afternoon, have their graduate student go into the lab and say, sequence that for me. And so now we can track down these mutations.
Okay, so the big news that enables you to write this devastating book is that it's no longer speculation. We now can look at the actual mutations and determine whether they are helping the organism and how. And based on your research,
Well, it turns out that they do help them. There's lots of mutations that help. But the bottom line is that overwhelmingly, the mutations are ones that break things that were already there. They take genes that are working in some organisms and figuratively snap them and throw them away, and that helps in some circumstances. And people might wonder, how can breaking something help? Well, if you think of your car, suppose your life depended on you getting better gas mileage for your car. What's a quick and easy way to get better gas mileage? Well, of course, you can throw things away. You can take off weight. You can take the doors and throw them away. Take the hood and throw it away. Of course, those are useful in some circumstances. But if right now your life depended on your car getting better gas mileage, the way to go is to throw those out. The cell does that too.
I just imagine a lot of people are thinking, well, so what? In other words, if mutation is the genetic code is broken here and that helps, why is that a problem for Darwinism?
Well, because it shows that Darwin's mechanism is actually powerfully devolutionary rather than evolutionary. It strongly tends to break things, throw them away, like the example I talked about, and that's not going to be something that constructs sophisticated molecular machinery such as we found in the cell.
Okay, so what you're saying is if I have a wolf and I want to breed dogs of various kinds, which basically has happened, right? You're saying that it's not a process of evolution, it's a process of devolution, meaning that you take the standard dog model of DNA and you break stuff off of it. So tell us about that.
Yeah, believe it or not, the complete DNA genome has been sequenced not only of wolves and not only of a particular dog, but dozens of breeds of dogs, purebred dogs with different features so that people can track down what's going on, what is causing them to have smaller stature or fuzzier fur or other features. And it turns out that to a very large extent, it's due to breaking genes that were already there. There's genes involved in fur that if you break them, makes it curlier. And genes involved in bone growth, if you break them, it'll be shorter. And there's developmental genes that help a snout develop. And if you break that, you get a truncated snout like in a bulldog. So we did show how Darwin's theory works by artificial selection. But it's working by breaking genes.
I feel like what you're saying, though, is that, in other words, what this is leading us to conclude is there are these models that exist. There's a dog, there's a cat, there are these different things, and you're saying that we can have microevolution and we can break the genes, and so we can make this kind of a cat or this kind of a dog, but we can never, because we're not adding genes or whatever, you can never breed a dog that will become a giraffe or a horse. You can never break out of the dog wheel rut, so to speak. Like, it's always going to be some kind of dog.
That's correct. And more than that, you can think that, well, as this dog is selected for various things, say a French poodle or so on,
Right.
those genes are thrown away and they're gone. They're not coming back. So the ability of the dog that has already been selected to
Right.
adapt to a different environment becomes more and more restricted so that it becomes evolutionarily brittle.
What you just said, though, because I want this to be clear for the layman, and because scientists like us, you know, we understand this stuff. But they don't know that I'm a scientist, but I know. So here's the issue. You're saying, I think, that Darwinists have been saying, for example, that there are no limits, that there are no boundaries, that a species is fluid, and that if I were to breed dogs long enough, I could get them as tiny as a housefly. But in reality, you're saying, no, the limits of dogness, and I just coined that word, are fixed. And the same thing with how big dogs can get. Because I think to those of us who don't know science, you'd sort of think like, look, why couldn't I breed a dog as big as this room? Why? But you're saying I can't.
Well, Clifford accepted.
Yes, right. And he's red, which is a whole other...
That's correct. Actually, I write in the book about a number of what I call luxuriantly evolving species, particularly on islands, such as the Galapagos, Darwin's finches. And it turns out there's a number of them. The finches have been on the Galapagos for millions of years, and they've formed about a dozen or 16 species. It's kind of uncertain. And a couple of, the next level up is genera, or genus, but no new families. And that's the next level up. And there are other rapidly evolving fish called cichlids in African lakes. And they have been there just 15,000 years. And it's known that because the Lake Victoria, evaporated 15,000 or so years ago. And these species are found nowhere else in the world. And there's about 1,000 of them, new species, and a number of new genera. No new families, though. And the level of biological family is like the cat family versus the dog family, okay? Lions and tigers and wolves and foxes and so on. And I make the case in the book that that is the limit of Darwinian unguided evolution. You can have new species and new genera, but you can't make a new family by unguided evolution.